Okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is 5:30, and I will call this regular meeting of the Burnsville City Council to order. It is our tradition to stand for a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance, and we invite you to join us. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And we have some announcements this evening for our upcoming meetings. Council meetings are scheduled for Tuesday, December 17th at 5:30 p.m. and Tuesday, January 7th at 5:30 p.m. We have a work session that's scheduled for Tuesday, December 10th at 5:30 p.m. and a special work session scheduled for Wednesday, December 4th at 6 p.m. All meetings are held here in the council chambers. Tonight, we will be adopting the levy and the budget. The next item on the agenda is citizens' comments. This is the opportunity for anyone in the audience who wishes to address the council on an item that is not in a printed agenda and not an application form that will be coming before us at a future date. Is there anyone who wishes to address the council? Anyone who wishes to address the council? Seeing no one, I will then move on. The next item is for emergency items only, and this is additions to the final agenda. Ms. Mescali, are there any additions?
No, Madam Mayor.
Okay, members of the council. Okay, thank you. We then move on to the consent agenda. The consent agenda is a group of items that is considered to be routine and will be enacted by one motion. However, an item on the consent agenda can be removed for a separate discussion and vote. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes an item on the consent agenda to be removed for a separate discussion and vote? Anyone who wishes an item to be removed? Seeing no one, Ms. Muscali?
No, Madam Mayor.
Members of the council? May I then have a motion to adopt the consent agenda, please?
Motion to adopt.
Second.
Okay, Councilmember Schultz makes the motion, seconded by Councilmember Workman. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, say nay. And the motion carries. We now move on to the regular agenda. And the first item on the regular agenda is a public hearing. And this is an ordinance establishing the 2020 fees and charges. And our finance director, Mrs. Stry, good evening.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, council members. Tonight, the first segment of the budget processing is related to fees and charges. These fees and charges that were attached in your background are the fees and charges that were included in the 2020 budget process. Within the fees and charges, we are proposing an increase to liquor license fees, which is the reason that a public hearing is required on these. And then it also gives us direction on moving on gas and electric utility franchise fees. And with that, I stand for questions.
Okay. Members of the council, we have gone through all of this, through all of the many work sessions that we've had with regard to the budget. Any questions for Ms. Stry? If not, I need a motion, please, to adopt the ordinance. Is someone going to make a motion to adopt the ordinance? I'll make the motion to adopt the ordinance. Is there a second?
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? Ms. Stry?
I just
There
want to
is
remind
it's
you
a
of the
public
public
hearing.
hearing.
Yes. Forgive me. This is a public hearing. Is there anyone who wishes to speak to this item? Anyone who wishes to speak to this item? I will then close the public hearing, and a motion was made and second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, say nay.
Nay.
And the clerk has the division at the House. Thank you. We then move on to item 5B. Item 5B is the application for the City of Burnsville for an amendment to City Code Title 10, Zoning Chapter 7, General Provisions Section 18, Screening and Buffer Areas, Chapter 12, R1, One Family Residential District, and Chapter 14, R2, Two Family Residential District of the Burnsville City Code to modify screening requirements for trash and recycling receptacles in single-family and two-family residential areas. And tonight, Mrs. Madden, and welcome and congratulations. Mrs. Madden just got married, and so 8 days ago. So congratulations and best wishes.
Thank you.
I was secretly correcting her, Madam Mayor.
Nope, nope. I knew that she had gotten married and she has a new name.
It wasn't in the background.
No, it was
No.
not. Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. So this item is an ordinance amendment for consideration to modify some screening requirements for our trash and recycling receptacles in, like the mayor said, in single-family and two-family zoning districts, based on some council direction to remove screening requirements and adjust placement provisions, as discussed at the October work session. So the Planning Commission did hold a public hearing on this item and the ordinance amendment last week on November 25th, where they voted 3-2 in approval of the ordinance with some modifications to the staff recommendation and the language on the placement provisions. Their recommendation included this adjustment to the language to only allow trash and recycling containers behind the front-facing wall of the garage or structure. The language which eliminated the screening requirements of the trash and recycling receptacles was unchanged in the Planning Commission recommendation. And then this slide shows the difference in the language of the ordinance amendment for the placement of these containers. So the original staff recommendation stated that they be stored within 5 feet of the structure. The Planning Commission recommended changes which indicated containers should also be placed behind the front of the primary building, wall, garage, or structure. The Planning Commission recommendation is the recommendation on the table as stated in your background packet. As part of the council direction to move forward with this ordinance amendment, staff did conduct community outreach and received many pieces of feedback across multiple avenues. Forum on the city website processed most of the comments, which were included in last week's Planning Commission background. Since that meeting, a few additional messages did come in, which were included as a hard copy to you today. The comments illustrated the passionate issue and nature of the topic. Staff did receive a total of 194 responses across the multiple outreach avenues. So,
Could you pop?
Okay, Councilmember Schultz, did you want,
No, I just wanted to.
you just want this?
Thank you.
Okay.
oh, and I can move on? All right, thanks. So the Planning Commission recommendation was approval of the ordinance amendment with that language change to the placement provision to add that the trash and recycling containers be placed behind the front of the primary building wall, garage, attached or detached accessory structure facing the primary street. This still included the within 5 feet provision, and it still includes the removal of the screening requirements as part of the ordinance amendment. And then I'll open this up for your discussion on the topic. Thank you.
Any questions for Mrs. Madden? Any? Okay. Thank you so much. We do have some residents who wish to speak on this item. So first is Mr. Kramer. You want to speak on this item, so please come before us. And
welcome. Just curious, the reason for the changes, why we're going from being less restrictive
Yeah.
and allowing this to be visible.
yeah, Mr. Kramer, we need for you to give us your full name and your address for the record,
Toronto
please.
Kramer, 3001 Chandler Court, Burnsville.
Yeah. Just because some of us know you.
Some
A
do,
lot
but
of the
some
people,
don't.
a lot of the people who are watching, Mr. Kramer. So we just want to make sure that we have your name and address for
Okay.
the record. So you want to know why we're making
Yeah,
these
the reason for the
changes.
changes, that's
Okay.
one question I had.
Okay,
Yes.
Ms. Arnold? Madam?
The changes came about based on some city council discussion over feasibility of residents to be able to comply with this ordinance amendment as it previously stood or currently stands without being adopted. The discussion mainly centered around winter weather and how maybe the financial obligation of building a screening fence may be complicated for some residents to work that into their home and on their property, and the discussion about in the winter where these can be placed because of snow storage on residential properties and things like that. Does that help answer your question?
Yeah, yes. But the other clarification is, the way the new proposal is here, is within 5 feet of the garage or accessory structure or behind the primary structure. So you have the option, like with my garage, is that considered my primary structure because it's attached? So it has to go behind the wall. So if
Or
your garage is
inside,
attached,
or so that it's not visible,
from the street.
yes.
So that's the main thing we're after is, which most cities do have, Egan, Apple Valley, Savage, all of them have not visible from public right of way or from the street.
Okay,
And I think that's, the way it was worded here, I think a lot of people aren't certain that you can put it 5 feet out in front of your garage.
okay. And you're all in opposition of that?
In opposition, yeah, we want it to be where it's not visible from the street as it is now. Because it's, as your violations, looks like over the years have slowly decreased, except for 1 year.
Yeah.
So more and more people are complying with it. And I know there are some, circumstances where people can't do it, or where their yards are developed. I don't know if there'd be some considerations for those people to make them exempt or do the best they can do with it.
Okay.
But I think most residents that I've talked to, especially from our neighborhood like that, is we just don't want it to be visible from the streets. I mean, why start trashing up the neighborhoods or garbage cans being set outside all the time, and then raccoons get into it, or it gets a windy day and now we got garbage all over the neighborhood. So that's our main concern, is it isn't any worse than it is now.
Okay. Yeah,
So
and we
it's-
thank you for the work that you helped us about 10 years ago on this same issue. I think it was 10 years or so ago. So thank you that you're continuing to be diligent about making sure that the neighborhoods continue to look, at least from the street side, visibly,
Aesthetic.
well,
whatever,
yeah, but well-maintained, yeah, for the neighborhood.
I know there's a lot of other concerns in here about, the trash service, which we did, 10, 15 years ago,
Yeah.
that with our neighborhood, we were fortunate, we have one service for our whole development. We contracted it ourselves, so we keep the trucks off our streets.
Yeah. And we
And,
try to tell others to also model what you have done, because you've really maintained that throughout the 15 years.
Yes, and we've tried to help some neighborhoods do it, and some of the larger ones, like North River Hills.
Yeah.
It's so big, it's hard to get everybody to comply with it.
Yeah.
But, so I guess maybe that answered my question, is that the only thing that's changed is if you have it along the side of the house, it doesn't have to be screened, is that the only change, or?
Yeah. Ms. Arnold, is the way the ordinance reads now? Because I'm looking at the red marked.
Yes, if I can go back to the red marked, and this is the change from the planning commission, so this doesn't include every portion of the amendment. But what you're stating is true, so it would not be required to be screened if it was 5 feet from the side of the home.
Okay, but it cannot be in the front of the house.
With the planning commission's recommendation, it cannot any longer be in the front of the house. The original recommendation that went to the public hearing last week was that it could be stored within 5 feet of the front. And then the planning commission recommended a further change that it cannot be behind the front wall of the building, so.
It can't be out in front of it, between that and the street.
That's correct.
So none of them can be visible from public right of way, or the ones on the side can be?
The screening requirements were removed, so if it was on the side of the home within that 5 feet, it would not be required to be screened.
But you're allowed to have them 5 feet from the house on the side?
Yes.
So I don't know if I agree with that. I'm in opposition to that. I think you still should be screen, some of the comments you had here, some of the people say that it's very expensive, but most screening is a small little fence or a plant a tree or a bush, something to put it behind to screen it. Now, if you start getting 5 feet out from the house, now I don't know why they want to have them 5 feet away from the house. Why you're allowed to do that, why not up to the house on the side?
Yeah, 5 feet. Yeah. Okay, Councilmember, I think it's Councilmember Keeley? Yes.
Oh, sorry, I moved.
Yeah, it's okay. I know.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I want to get a little clarity for my own interpretation of that 5 foot, because I thought it was there because sometimes people have some landscaping along the side of the house, and so, outside the garage, right, so it's along the side of the house, and they may have 5 feet of bushes or shrubs or whatever, and so is that why we're saying it can be 5 feet instead of, it doesn't have to, you don't have to take out your shrubs to be able to put it against the side of the garage, you can have it as much as 5 feet out?
So with the council recommendation to move forward with these ordinance changes, one of the big discussions of looking at our peer cities was the city of Plymouth's model, which did not give a specific numerical feet for distance. And for an enforceability standpoint and from staff to be able to have an ordinance that we can interpret easily and that residents can interpret easily instead of the word abut, which can mean different things to people, we went with 5 feet as an arm span, essentially, easy to understand for residents and for staff to be able to explain and interpret.
So is that saying it has to be within the 5 feet?
Yes, or
okay.
just at any point within 5
Inside
feet.
that 5 feet,
Yes.
which could then accommodate some shrubs or bushes, but it would still be along the side of the house.
Yes.
To your comments, the way I interpret this as well is, what we're saying is, if I wanted to put my garbage cans along the side of my house, next to the garage, which is a fairly common place to put them, previously, you had to put in some fencing, put a shrub there, so it was 100% out of view. And I think in the spirit of what we're trying to do here is we're saying, if it's not facing the street, but you've put them around the side of your house, and portion of that garbage can, that one on the end, would still be visible, that we're basically saying that's okay, and that's kind of what I've seen in most other cities that I've driven around. We're just not saying don't put them in the front of the house and face the road. And I have seen that too, right, where people just stick it right out in front of their garage to the left, maybe in front of the third stall or whatever, on the corner of the house, and they're literally between the road and the house. We're saying put them around the corner, but now you don't have to put up a fence, put up a bush, so it's 100% screened. So there's some visibility of the can, but not that much. And we had some background notes that noted, garbage cans today are quite different than they were 20 years ago, or 30 or 40, whenever this was originally put in. They were dented up, beat up, dirty metal cans that really were unsightly. These new molded plastic cans are much better than that, but it's not we're also saying those are good enough to put right in front of your house. We still want them along the side, so they're partially screened, I think, naturally by the house. As everybody, I've driven around all over the country, in cities all over the country, and I've seen examples of apparently no ordinance where all the garbage cans literally are lined up in front of the houses to the street, and apparently that's okay to them. We went to screening, which said we never ever want to see your garbage can in visible sight unless it's garbage day. And I've agreed with, in the spirit of what we're trying to do here with Councilmember Schultz, who brought this forward, to say it seems a bit excessive to force 100% screening. And I think that's what we're proposing is, let's relax a little bit, but not allow it to be put in the front of the house. So there's still going to be, majority of those cans aren't going to be seen, but some of them can. Then the other issue we were dealing with is houses that have steep grades on the sides, where you have a split level and the garage is on the main level, and you have yardage that comes around, and there's not a flat surface to put it anywhere on the quote side of the house. They're in a difficult situation. It almost says you have to put them inside your garage, and some people do and choose to, but that's also, it looks better clearly from the city standpoint, but it also is the challenge that Councilmember Gustafson brought up in a previous discussion is you're going to attract some rodents inside your garage. So there maybe has to be some other issues addressing that. But that, I think, is the one area of this that is, to me, left a little more open to interpretation. If I have one of those situations, under this ordinance, we're saying, you have a hardship, you can put them in view. But I don't know how else we deal with that, other than, because I don't think we can say, well, if you have that situation, you're forced to put them in your garage.
Right.
That's not fair and equitable to everybody else that doesn't have to put, to them, compared to everybody else who may not, simply because they have flat land and they have a place that they can circle around the side of their garage, so.
Yeah, I can understand
it's
the
difficult.
hardship part of it. We're like, if you're not physically able to do it or pull it in the snow, I understand that. Like our neighborhood, 99% of everybody puts them in the garage. And a lot of the complaints in here are about, well, they stink and everything else, and my recommendation is wash it out once in a while.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
leaving them outside too, especially where we're at, by the River Valley, now you get the raccoons and everything else coming up with that, and they're getting into the garbage cans. Now you got garbage all over the neighborhood. So it is better to put it inside something, or I know some people put some kind of container and they put like a
Yeah.
shed or whatever out there, but that's a little excessive. Where some people said they can't afford it on some of these comments. Like I said, a small fence, or like I said, in a situation, like you got a yard that you got no yard to put it next to.
Right.
I can understand that where you have some circumstances, but I'd still rather see, like Apple Valley and Egan, still not visible from public right of way
Okay.
of any type. That's my preference is like that, but that helped clear up a little bit. I don't know if the wording should be changed a little bit, because the way you read this thing here,
Yeah.
well, I can put it in front of my garage.
Yeah.
Or doing it, maybe that should be clarified, that
Yeah.
the way it's worded. Because it says, or behind principal structure. Well, if I don't want to put it behind principal structure, I'll just put it out in front of my garage. So maybe that could be clarified, and may help people.
Yeah,
'Cause
that
people-
makes sense.
People read it any way they want to, and that's why I understood it here.
Okay.
Madam Mayor, if I may,
Yes.
just a quick follow-up.
Yeah.
I live in a
Councilmember Q.
townhome, and because of our ordinance with the screening, even though this is around the backside of our home, there are other solutions out there, but I'm not saying that this is what people should do. It's an option. We ended up buying it's a plastic enclosure that you basically order and snap together, and it's got a pop lid, and both of the large garbage cans go inside that. So now it's a, tan and brown topped decorative trash can container, I guess,
Yeah.
put it that way. It's an option. We chose to do it, but it wasn't cheap. But it is an option out there. There are other options out there. I would still say I'm screening my garbage cans as a result. I just preferred having it that way rather than them just sitting out, even though they're on the backside of our townhome. But there are some other solutions to put a garbage can in that can contain them in more plastic, unfortunately, to make them look nicer. So I fully expect we've got a lot of pros and cons. We've got a lot of people saying, yeah, in my situation, I can put them along the side of my garage within 5 feet. A portion of the one can that's closest to the street might be visible, but it's not in front of my house, and it's not unsightly in their opinion, in other opinion. And then we have folks that are, we love the fact that and those that may have bought screening like I did, and now maybe I don't have to have screening. So we are dealing with the spectrum of opinions and desires in this issue. And I don't know that we're gonna please everybody, I guarantee we won't, but
No,
hopefully we don't end up dramatically changing what our screening was. And I think this proposal, just to say they can't be in front of the house, between the road and the house, is a means to get us to a different place that still looks nice. Right? We're not gonna have cans out in front. I think the other challenge is on the corner lots. And the lots with 3 sides, with roads, I mean, where do they put them, right? And we have a lot of them, because we have a lot of streets, a lot of corners,
Right.
a lot of cul-de-sacs, which creates a lot of corner lots, and they are even more challenged.
But if the city could emphasize that if you have the ability to screen it,
Yeah.
but don't force them into screening it. But main thing is keeping it as much as possible out of view of the street. The city's gone through a lot of things over the years by getting recreational vehicles moved and
Yeah.
somehow keeping the city cleaned up, and I
Yeah.
hate to be going the other direction, now we're gonna start trashing the neighborhood up again,
Yeah.
or the city up again.
And I think it's fair to I don't think we should interpret this change as, oh, now we're gonna have garbage cans down you drive down the street, you're gonna see cans everywhere. I don't think that's what's the,
Well, not
what
they
we're
can't put them
trying
in
to
front
do
of the
here.
house,
Right.
no.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Most people, but some people will. And I hate to start slowly going, because
Yeah,
it took
well-
many years to
Yeah.
get it this direction.
Yeah.
If the
Not
language
sure
is.
on, now we're gonna bring it back the
Agreed.
other
If the
direction.
language is done correctly, there will be no garbage cans allowed to be put in front of the house, between the street and the house, and those are the folks who will get, a slip of paper from the city saying, hey, this is not to our compliance, would you please move them? And we'll give them some instructions to do so.
Or like we usually just, go to your neighbor and tell them, hey, this is what's going on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like I said, maybe you can, I don't know, whatever you're gonna vote on, but they clarify the language of it so it does state that. Because right now, I think it's a little
Yeah.
vague of what you can and can't do.
And the other thing that we can do is that we put out our bulletin on a quarterly basis. Perhaps we can also make sure that we remind people about this particular ordinance change and what they can do.
Okay.
And so we'll continue to ensure that people are aware and that we all want to live in harmony together, and we all want our property values to continue to be viable and increase in market value, and the neighborhood to also continue to be viable and increased in market value. So those are the things that we want to make sure for our community. And I think part of it is our communication with everybody. And so using the bulletin is one way that we can do that. And if things started to go the other direction, then we can always revisit it.
Okay.
Okay?
All right, thank
Yeah,
you.
and thank you very much. Mr. Norberg? Good
Hi.
evening.
My name's Douglas Norberg. I live on 10701 Cambridge Court. You answered most of my questions with him and stuff. I'm still against this ordinance. Here's a perfect example of
You want to just put it there and they'll catch it on the camera and then it'll go up and all of us
Okay.
can see it.
Does that
There
work?
it is.
This is a neighbor on my street that I took a picture this afternoon.
Okay,
And as you notice, it's got all the garbage cans in front, it's got the grill up in front. And on the side, they also have stacked more garbage cans and more other stuff. This is a detriment to our property values and stuff, and I just want to keep Burnsville clean.
yeah.
But that's all I really got. I just want to make sure that,
And I see, and I do understand, we've gotten some photographs also and where people are saying, this is what I have to look at.
yes, this is, we walk by it or drive by it every day and stuff, and it's an eyesore. And it hurts our property values.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you so much. And I think it's Mr. Herman? Hermanson? Okay.
Bruce Hermanson, 3116 Chandler Court. And I'm one of those corner lots.
Okay.
So, and I had a berm that was built when the house was there, and we removed the berm during construction. We wanted more access. The berm was right up next to the garage. But if I understand the ordinance correctly, I could put the cans on the side of my garage and it would be not visible to the street in front of my house, but visible on the side street. Is that correct?
The way it's written now, that I would suggest
Yes.
that that's what it says.
Yes.
I don't, people are, I have to be honest with you, my recycling bin is full every week. My trash can is very little, maybe one bag every week. And I'm hoping that the rest of the city is that way. By the way, I want to comment, when I came here tonight, part of the city is just gorgeous, just beautiful. And so, in the spirit of that heart of the city and keeping our city clean, I think it's important that we keep the ordinance the way it is. So I really do oppose this because I think you're running down a slippery slope. I also see the fact that you could probably have business owners coming to you at some point in time and having the same hardships or the same argument with you that it says, hey, wait a minute, you're doing it for residential now, why wouldn't we do this for business? And you require them to put in screening and actual storage containers.
Yeah. Okay. You make some very good points.
Okay?
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Hermanson. Okay. I don't have anyone else who wish to speak on this item. Is there anyone who wishes to speak that didn't sign up? Okay, thank you. Members of the council. Councilmember Keeley.
I just want to follow up. The good comments in the commercial was addressed. Actually, one of the things that triggered this discussion came from both residential but also commercial. Our Ames Center building, which the city, you own, had a bit of a challenge with meeting our ordinance for trash screening. And so we already have addressed some changes in our commercial. There's a business owner that I've been in communication with over the last 3 years who has a hardship situation where there wasn't any place on his property because of when it was built back in the 70s, and he's got a road on 3 sides. There was no place for him to put without literally building a small building at a high cost just to contain a couple of garbage cans, which made no sense at all. So we've been addressing this situation for commercial as well as looking at the residential and trying to be a little bit more in line with what other cities do. Not very many, when you look around, require screening. There's a lot that say get it out of public view, but don't say you have to build a fence or plant and make sure that it's 100% invisible to any perspective around your house, which is, I think, where I think that was getting a little excessive, but it's been around a long time. I don't disagree. But I'm looking for some common sense approach to it, so people aren't forced to build structures or build fences. They can put it along the side of their house, out of direct view, and that should be okay, in my perspective. So, again, I am not in favor of going with free-for-all and having garbage cans along the front of the house. That was never part of this discussion from my perspective, and I'm interested in changing our ordinance, but keeping the front of the houses the way they should. That gentleman who brought the picture of the house with 2 garbage cans in front of it, I don't think that should be allowed. I mean, it isn't allowed under our current ordinance, and it wouldn't be allowed under this proposed ordinance. Thank you.
Councilmember Workman.
Thank you. I'd just like to address what's in front of us and the Planning Commission review of this. I think Ms. Garros touched on some litigation. No, Ms. Garros, at the Planning Commission meeting about some litigation about the word opaque. And Ms. Madden can maybe help me out on that a little bit, but that there was some hard or difficult, it was difficult to define what that exactly meant. And so that we switched to fully screened.
Yes.
And now there's still some challenging interpretations of what that truly means as well, which is, I think, one of the reasons why we're discussing this. As far as the staff recommendation versus the Planning Commission recommendation, I appreciate the diligence that the Planning Commission put into this and the discussion that they had. My issue with behind the primary structure is that it really makes no difference from the staff recommendation, because if it's in front of your home or 2 feet to the right and behind your front lot line, it's still equally visible from the front street. So I understand what they were going after, but it doesn't achieve what I think they were trying to achieve, which is why I'm more comfortable with the staff recommendation in this case. So that's all I have to say at this time.
Okay. Councilmember Schultz.
Looking at this, just and there was a couple of reasons why we looked at this issue. Number one was residents who are struggling to comply with it. And although people are noting that there was a lessening in, that it looked like more people were complying with it, what actually appeared to be happening more often was people were granted exemptions, more and more people were granted exemptions, and we just, staff knew that those were ones that they struggled to comply with the ordinance as written. They've been checked, they've worked with that homeowner, like, that's as good as it gets, and so, don't need to keep checking them. So that was one issue that we had with that. The other issue was the sheer number of calls that people had on issues with garbage, and is this 100% screened? Because I think it's 80% screened. There's a bush there, and the homeowner's like saying, my garbage can is screened, and the neighbor next door to him is saying, well, yeah, you have a bush, but I can see the side of the garbage can. And so there was quite a bit of staff time devoted to how screened is it? So we were looking at how do we also reduce that, make it very clear what the ordinance is. And thank you for asking for clarification and to have it a little more clear. And I agree with you on that. So that's also one of the reasons why I would go with what the staff recommendation was on this. I think that would solve those problems, make things a little more uniform, and have this be a little easier for everyone to follow as well. Everyone knows what the expectations and the rules are then. It's pretty clear.
Okay. Anything else? So you see staff's recommendation and you see the planning commission's recommendation. And you also had a diagram of, because we received 148 comments, and then you had a diagram that really shows us the people who are saying leave the ordinance as is, which was the majority, and then there were people who said the changes. When you evaluate it, the folks who have said keep it as is, and the staff recommendation versus the planning commission, where do you see that analysis with regard to the two? Or maybe that's because, I tried reading through all of the 148.
It really was very closely split down the middle
Yeah.
from the comments we received, and many of the comments, they would state that they were either overwhelmingly in favor or in opposition, but they would also add, maybe I could be okay with it if
Yeah.
this type of a change was
Yeah.
implemented. So there were a lot of, I think a lot of people that did respond to this had strong opinions on the topic, and clarifying the language of the ordinance to make everyone pleased with the outcome is not going to, it's not
Yeah.
viable, but that there are some changes that if the council would like to adjust that based on some of the comments they've received, that's something.
I think clarification, Mr. Kramer made a very good observation that we need to make sure the language is clear, so when people read it, it is clear. And I think, Mr. Kramer, can you come back to, if you look at the staff recommendation, does that meet?
You're called back up to the front of the class.
So if you look at the staff recommendation,
Up on the screen.
to the planning commission?
Look up.
Yeah.
Look up.
Oh,
Yeah.
there. Yeah, that's the one I had before.
Yeah, that's the one,
It
yeah,
says or.
yeah,
It makes it sound like, well, I don't want to put it behind my structure, so I'm going
Yeah,
to put it alongside.
that's right.
And
And what you're saying is remove the or,
that it should be stored behind the, let's see, I don't know how you word that, but, so I'm still in favor of the screening myself.
yeah.
But
We'll all, everybody, I think if we all monitor and make sure, I think we'll get there.
I don't know if that's something to clarify, because when you say 5 feet of the garage, some people are gonna say, well,
Yeah.
mine's all one building, but some people are gonna determine, well, this is my garage, this is my house.
Yeah,
I can put it 5 feet in front of my garage.
Yeah.
As the picture showed, that he had there, that showed that they're in front of his garage, and maybe some people might think, well, I can put it in front of my garage 5 feet out,
okay.
or to the side. It doesn't say it has to be to the side 5 feet of the garage or accessory structure. It doesn't say it has to be to the side of the garage.
Yeah. So I
Maybe
think that's
it can't go in front of the garage, it has to go to the
to the
side.
side of the garage. So, Ms. Madden, can you give us your thoughts on staff's recommendation? Is it 5 feet of the side of the garage?
So with the staff recommendation, based on the direction that we received and following the language of the City of Plymouth's
Yeah.
ordinance, that's what the staff recommendation reflects, other than the staff addition of the within 5 feet of the garage or accessory structure, because we felt that that would be easier to interpret and to, for others to read and interpret rather than the word abut, which does come with some.
But on the side of the garage?
So, but the staff recommendation would have allowed in front as long as it was within 5 feet.
In the front of the garage?
It would have, yes.
That doesn't make sense.
That is, yeah, this is where we see a lot of folks, if you have those garbage cans in the front of the garage, just like what, I think it was Mr. Norberg who brought the photographs. Yeah, so,
Well, an example of a house like that is right on Highway 13 in North River Hillside, right on the highway. They got a separate single-standing garage next to their house. So according to this thing, they could put their garbage cans in front of that garbage can,
Yeah.
and it's
yeah,
in front facing the public right-of-way also.
yeah, exactly.
So it
At
should
least
be
that's how
around
I'm
the side. It
interpreting
shouldn't be
it.
facing the public right-of-way.
Okay, okay. Councilmember Keely, and then I'm going to go to Mr. Peterson. Oh, you two, okay. Ms. Faulkner. Yeah, you two switch, okay. So, Councilmember Keely,
That
or,
was from a little while ago, my question was answered.
pardon me?
That was an outdated queuing, sorry.
Yeah,
My
no,
question
no.
was answered.
Oh, okay, so, Ms. Faulkner.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, members of the audience, I just want to clarify that what Ms. Madden is talking about was the staff recommendation that went to the Planning Commission. After the Planning Commission talked about this,
Yeah.
they're recommending to you that you use the word "and."
Yeah.
So it's within 5 feet of the primary structure and behind the front of the primary building wall, et cetera. So that's the recommendation and the resolution that's before you. So that would require it to be on the
Side and not the front. Does that make sense? Because I'm
Except for-
hearing,
Because the behind the.
so it's
One
and not
situation, the one I can
or.
think of that is a separate garage. The house is here, the garage is probably set back 5 feet, well, a few feet back. So it'll be still behind the front of the primary structure, but it's in front of the garage, about 5 feet back.
Okay,
With
Ms.
the
Faulkner,
line.
I don't think that's what the ordinance intention is.
Madam Mayor, the recommendation from the Planning Commission would allow that to be in front of the garage if the garage is set back further than the principal structure that's closest to the street. The idea is that it be not in front of the part of the structure that's closest to the street.
And then there is the rub. Yeah,
The
that-
houses are not that,
Right.
just a
Yeah,
few feet
and
difference.
now you have those garbage containers in the front,
In the front,
in
yeah.
full view of the public right-of-way. Okay,
That's where like Apple Valley and Eagan like that, they have in their ordinances, most of them do is out of sight from the public right of way.
yeah. I think, okay,
And if it's off to the side of the garage,
that's okay,
it's not quite as bad, but to me, no, it's still not okay. I'd still like to see it screened to some type, but.
yeah. So not
That's what
in the
I'm getting at. If
front,
it's not attached or attached,
yeah,
it can make a difference.
okay. Members of the council, do you want to amend the planning commission and make sure that it's not in the front, but it's on the side, whether it's the garage or the primary structure, that it is on the side? That allows our residents to say, okay, maybe I don't like that it's not screened, but if it's not in the front, then we'll look at that compromise. Mr. Jamnik?
Mayor and council, I think if you read that sentence from the planning commission in its recommendation, as Ms. Faulkner indicated, by adding the word "and," each of those independent clauses function so that you would say it's in or within 5 feet of the primary structure and behind the front of the primary building wall, and behind the front of the garage, and behind the front of the attached or detached accessory structure.
Then
So
that
when you do a
gets it.
sentence construction
Yeah.
and decouple it,
Yeah,
it's behind each of those independent. So the planning commission recommendation, I believe, does effectuate what the council's stated intent is that, as Councilmember Keeley observed, if
Yeah.
it's on the side, you'd see the
Yeah,
side
just
of
the
the
side of-
cart or
yeah.
the cart in there behind that wall. But it could not be along
the
the
front.
front of any of
Yeah.
those structures
and I think that's the
from
intent
the
that
primary
we,
street. Now, the
Yeah.
gentleman mentioned the corner lot, that would be one of those circumstances where it would be viewable from a major street, if you would.
Yeah.
But, that is, when you're dealing with thousands of properties.
Yeah.
You are functioning here to try to get about 80%, 90%, and dealing with some of those outriders, and hopefully
Yeah.
people will reach the conclusion that in that situation, it'd be beneficial for them not to pick up their garbage that rolls down the hill or whatever by
Yeah.
storing it inside or put in a container up or doing something. But you're not gonna get all of these situations
Yeah.
addressed. But I think the planning commission recommendation is indeed tighter
Yeah.
than the original staff recommendation by the use of the word
Yeah.
and
take the
connection
or
of the
out.
additional building structures.
Yeah, yeah. Councilmember Key, are you yielding to Councilmember Schultz?
Yes, because I've spoken a
Okay.
lot and she hasn't had a chance to. yet.
Okay, Councilmember Schultz.
Could you explain by what you mean by tighter?
It addresses the,
Yeah.
each of the buildings.
Each of the buildings.
The looseness, I think, in the staff recommendation is the or
Yeah, it's the.
phrase, as well as the fact situation where if you had the garage detached from the principal structure, you could have the garbage can stored full-time
Yeah.
in front of the doors visible from the street along the driveway. You would not have that situation occurring here in the planning commission recommendation.
So, and
So it is a
that,
little bit more restrictive, if you will, of where you'd be able to place the container.
Mr. Jamnik, so that last sentence, so wall, garage attached, and detached accessory structure, not or.
Yeah, I
Because
mean,
that's the way
Well,
that,
The and, I think, is earlier in your
Correct.
sentence, right? Yeah, before that is stated.
yeah,
And.
yeah. And behind, and garage, and garage attached or detached accessory. Okay.
It has to have the and.
All
because
right.
This is the part.
Are you okay with that? I mean,
That's better.
I'm better? Okay.
I mean,
Okay,
it's better what you have, but like I said, I think most of us, we still like to, where none of it's visible from the public right of way,
okay,
which most cities have.
okay.
They will use an RV.
Thank
And
you.
there are some circumstances, like we said earlier, you know, person with disabilities
Yeah.
or a yard
Yeah.
that's all downhill,
Yeah,
or
yeah,
there are some certain, but that's very minor compared
Yeah.
to the 60,000 residents we have,
that-
the majority would be compliant.
okay, okay.
So anyway, I still prefer screening myself.
Thank you very much. I know all of you would prefer screening, so I see your heads nodding, so thank you so much. Okay. Councilmember Keeley.
Thank you. I'm glad we had this discussion because as you read this in
Yeah.
a more technical sense,
Yeah, and that's the
getting
way
to
I was-
my desire that they're along the sides of the structures and not in front of the structures, it reminded me of our RV ordinance.
Yeah.
And trailers and that kind of stuff, where you could pull it along the side of your house. It could be visible from the street, but it could not extend beyond the front-facing wall of your.
house.
And that's kind of what we're trying to say here, is
Yeah.
those cans can't be further toward the street than the front facing of your house or accessory structure or your garage, which means they're gonna be along the side.
They
right?
have
That
to
just
be.
sort of pinpoints it to be on the side.
Okay.
Still visible, but not nearly as visible as literally sitting in front of the garage facing the street. That's what I would support. How that language needs to be, I'll leave that up to the experts. But I think you're there.
Yeah.
Mr. Jen.
I think, yeah, I think all of us, and I think, Mr. Crane, I know we're just trying to get at a compromise here. And so, Councilmember Schultz.
So my question is, so on the language of this, if someone does have where their property has roads on either 3 sides of it, 2 sides of it, how does that play into both of these?
It would call the definitional issue of primary street, and that would call for an interpretation of what the
Yes.
primary street is. In other situations, it may be the front door, where the street address sign is located as a determinant. We've had other situations that call those factors into account. Some of the situations where the property owner declares it and then is held to that standard for all sorts of purposes. These things are not unique just to garbage containers. Air conditioning boxes, compressors, are a common issue. Your meters and other attachments where utilities are served into the house. Those also might be able to seen from the primary street, but they're seen in profile or in the side yard, where you can't place them in the rear yard. So we're gonna have those situations regardless of what you have as a ordinance, just like we've had challenges with the opacity issue and the totally screened issue. I mean, you are not gonna get 100% uniformity. There's just too much variation in the design of properties within any community, so.
Okay.
If I may follow up,
Yeah.
Madam Mayor?
Councilmember Schultz?
So in the planning commission recommendation to the city council, you're saying we'll still have issues with staff time having to make decisions based on sides. Do we still have that with the staff recommendation?
Yes, you'll have that with regardless of any regulation. Even if you have no regulation,
That's right.
you'll have nuisance complaints or other issues, so.
Well, I mean, yes, there'll be
But yeah,
nuisance complaints, but will there be as much of a determination where they have to go out and determine? Because it's my understanding, looking at the first one, it doesn't matter if there is a side street or a back street or a front street, it doesn't matter, it's 5 feet from the structure.
I think the planning commission recommendation, council member, is a little clearer.
Yeah.
So
I think
between
it
those
too.
two options, I would say you would have fewer interpretive calls with the planning commission recommendation, merely because it is a little bit
Yep.
more refined than the initial staff recommendation. As staff observed, there's the difference between and or, and a little bit more clarity on those detached garage situations. So I think you would have fewer staff calls with the planning commission recommendation. Just like I think you may have fewer staff calls with subsequent amendments and refinements to this, because as you go through it, residents and staff will be identifying ambiguities or issues here. And these are, as the mayor indicated, works in progress always.
Yeah.
And they ebb and flow with experience. And so you will find something where you say, we should tweak this or tweak that to refine it in order to respond to the conditions that aren't apparent at any time you're doing any ordinance amendment. Because literally, we're dealing with thousands of properties here.
And I think this is a direction that helps us to get at compromise between those who wanted a little bit more leniency and for us to maintain the quality of our neighborhoods. So we can move with the Planning Commission recommendation, just make sure that we have the language in place. The other part about all of this is that our staff can also, with our bulletins, to make sure that we have continuously educate folks on what the new ordinance is with regard to trash containers. Councilmember Keeley.
I just want to clarify with this planning commission recommendation where it says primary structure and behind the front of the primary building walls, detached, et cetera, facing the primary street. When I first read that, I thought, oh, it's saying it's got to be behind the entire structure. In other words, put it in the backyard. How do we clarify that? That's similar to like our RV ordinance where we're talking about the front
I think
facade, in other words, the front elevation line from the street to the front. We're not saying it's got to
it
be
may be
the
beneficial to
backyard.
provide
right?
some illustrations explaining it, but I think grammatically, the language works, as you indicated. It is that front wall determinant, creating a line extending, that a side yard placement would be acceptable.
Okay.
Yeah, and a photograph on what that means?
Yeah.
gives people clarity as what the ordinance reads. So, members of the council, are you ready to to adopt?
We'll see how far it goes. I'll make a motion that we accept the planning commission recommendation language.
Okay.
Oops, I just locked my screen out here, sorry. Gotta watch it, to touch the screen here. In regards to our application on City Code 10 zoning in Chapter 7, et cetera, et cetera. I don't want to read the whole thing.
Yeah,
I move for the planning commission language.
okay.
I second.
There's a motion and a second. Further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay, and the motion carries. We'll continue to watch it. And we'll continue to put out information through our bulletin and other communication methods that we have. So hopefully that everybody helps us to keep our community looking good. Yeah. But thank you for coming out. Thank you for being engaged. And we really appreciate you taking the time. Thank you. We now move on to 5C. 5C is the resolution to adopt the 2020 budget and establish the 2020 property tax levy and to adopt the 2020-24 capital improvement program. And Mrs. Stroud, welcome.
Good evening again, Madam Mayor and council members. I'm pleased to present to you the final budget and property tax levy for your approval this evening. Council began working on the 2020 budget back in June of this year, and you've had several meetings regarding the budget throughout the past several months. Council has historically considered the city and EDA levy together for transparency purposes. The city levy proposed is $37,588,674, and the EDA portion is $197,500. These amounts are the same as the proposed tax levy adopted in September for the max tax, and that were shown on the proposed property tax statements that people received in November from the county. The budget includes proposed funding changes between the city and the EDA fund, which increase the city levy with offsetting reduction in the EDA levy. And that was staffing changes and debt changes between the two funds. So the expenses moved to the general fund, as did the matching property tax levy. So you see them together represents a 6% increase. At tonight's meeting, you have several actions to take. First, for the city council meeting, you'll have to certify the 2020 tax levy and adopt the 2020 budget, also adopting the 2020 to 2024 CIP, the 5-year plan. Following that, the city council meeting will recess, thank you, and we'll have an EDA meeting, which you will be authorizing the 2020 EDA levy and EDA budget, and then we'll resume city council, and city council will need to approve the actions of the EDA. So that's kind of the movement for tonight. The first item to consider is to adopt the resolution of the 2020 property tax levy in the amount of $37,588,674. This does not include the EDA levy, which will be acted on separately. The amount is consistent with the previous budget meetings in your budget workbook. The second item to consider is to adopt the resolution of the 2020 budget totaling $110,479,517. This is all funds. And it's consistent with the budget workbook with council direction received during previous budget meetings. Fund level details included in your background and in the resolution. The third item to consider is to adopt the 2020-24 capital improvement plan. Again, this is a planning document that schedules the public improvements for the 5-year period of time. The CIP is presented in your budget workbooks and as presented in a budget work session by Mr. Peterson earlier in last month. Projects in the CIP will come before you during the normal approval process. So approving the CIP does not automatically approve any particular project. You will see each of those items again as they reach the levels of approval. And these three items can be adopted in one motion, and I stand for any questions.
Any questions for Ms. Stride? We've been working through it since in June, but we're always in budget. So, Councilmember Schultz?
Could you flip back to the previous screen?
Yes.
Thank you. That's all I wanted.
Okay. Councilmember Keeley, did you want, I just saw, did you?
Well, you had left it on speak, I just turned it off, but
Oh, because I saw you reach.
I was turning it off, but that's okay.
Okay.
If I may, I'll just
Okay.
pass
So,
along.
Councilmember Workman?
I just have a comment. I want to thank Ms. Strye for walking me through my first budget and helping make this understandable. I sincerely appreciate the time you've spent working with me on this. So.
Okay. Councilmember Keeley?
Thank you. I'll echo Councilmember Workman's sentiments and compliments. This is the 13th or 14th budget I've been through, and I thought your presentations throughout this entire 6-month-long process were fantastic. It was inclusive of infographics and charts that were easy for anyone who isn't as deeply engaged as we are to understand and extract what we were dealing with and grappling with from a budget standpoint. And certainly we've had plenty of public meetings because all of our meetings are televised, which I really appreciate, unless they're a couple of unusual ones like the all-day work session or a different type of meeting. But 99 or maybe 90% of our meetings are all televised. This whole 6 month, we've had a lot of great discussions throughout each of these segments of the budget, the levy, the fees, the capital expense. And so it is a load of work, absolutely a ton of work on your part and your staff and City Manager Melanie Lee's part, so and the rest of the staff. So I really do appreciate it. It was a more enjoyable experience to go through because the information was presented in a way that it was a lot easier to really absorb it and understand it and be able to make ultimately some good decisions, informed decisions as a result of it. But thank you very much. I know you get about 5 months off, maybe 6, and then you got to start all over again.
We'll be starting.
Yeah, and I
5 months off, just the budget, right? Then you get to actually do other work, right?
Thank you for the nice compliments. It really is a team effort. I would like to echo your sentiments too with City Manager Lee and Ms. Faulkner and Mr. Peterson, and then all the staff that and Mr. Lindberg, all the staff that are under them. We have a lot of people working on preparing the budget. A lot of people in my department as well. Ms. Rohde and Ms. Ryan also are very intimately involved in this, and it is a big team effort, and we always strive to make it better. And with anything, we're looking forward to the next process and how we make that better. So.
And I also want you to know that because of the way the book was laid out with all of the graphs and the narrative was so well done, I think every year it has improved. You've learned from previous year and said, okay, we need to do this one better. And for your 50-plus preparers throughout, and I think people need to understand, throughout this organization, there is so much transparency, not only within the organization, but then when our citizens hear it. When you have over 55 people within the organization who are preparing the budget, both from the union side and the non-union side, is why we have what we have today, where we don't go to arbitration, because everybody knows what it is. So I thank you for that. The other part that I want people to understand is that because when our residents also, and you and Ms. Lee also know that when I get those emails about the budget, and then when we go through and walk them through, it was like, oh, I have no problems. And thank you for making that clear. But the narratives, I thought, was so rich that it helped our residents understand the numbers, because it is very complicated when you're looking at the different funds. So that was well done. Thank you, City Manager Lee, and you, Ms. Wright, and all of the people who help us to get to this point. And so, thank you. So, members of the council, I need a motion to adopt the resolution to establish the 2020 tax levy, adopt the 2020 budget, and the 2020 to 2024 capital improvement program.
I will move that all three of those be bundled into one motion as stated by Mayor Couts.
Okay.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Okay, thank you. And now I will recess the Burnsville City Council meeting so the Economic Development meeting can convene. And I just want our residents to know that Councilmember Gustafson, who is the president of the EDA, is at the hospital with his mother. So our prayers go out to his mother and what's going on. And the vice president of the EDA is Councilmember Schultz. And your meeting, recess the Burnsville City Council meeting.
Okay. So I'll call the Economic Development Authority meeting to order. As our mayor noted, please note for the record that President Gustafson is absent. Item 1, are there any additions to the final agenda?
None.
Seeing none, we move on. Item 2 is the consent agenda, which is approval of the October 8 minutes. May I have a motion to adopt the consent agenda?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Keeley, seconded by Commissioner Workman. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Moving on to regular agenda. Item 3 is a resolution adopting the Burnsville Economic Development Authority 2020 property tax levy. Ms. Stray is presenting.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. We tonight have a proposed EDA levy of $197,500. This is $545,000 less than it has been in the past. And as I mentioned, that was because that moved to the general fund, or the general city levy, a variety of funds. And the related staffing and debt service were moved as well. This levy is below the EDA allowed levy, which is a percentage of taxable market value. If you were to levy the maximum amount, that would be somewhere near $1.2 million, so you're well below that. The 2020 budget for this fund is $615,503, which includes some one-time expenditures for 2020 and would be spending down some fund balance, and that was included in your 5-year financial plans. And with that, I stand for any questions.
Any questions?
Just one comment. Part of your job with this particular budget, and I know a little bit was done last year, is accommodating a anticipated $500,000 drop in host fees from waste management and the landfill for a variety of reasons, which started to cause a rethinking of how some of these funds, where they're funded, shifting staffing under one fund to actually put us in a far better position financially for some more sustainable and supportive type of funds going forward. And I know that's part of the reason why we have a large reduction of a little over $500,000 decrease from what we normally would levy to put into the EDA fund. I think it's fair to say for the audience watching and those that will read John's article is we're still funding our economic development. We don't have to fund it at the level that we used to because of those shifts. And those were all very good decisions in the interest of the city. So thank you very much.
Okay, any other questions? Motion to adopt the resolution.
Make a motion to adopt the resolution for the EDA levy for 2020.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Keeley, seconded by Commissioner Krautz. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay. Nay. And the motion carries. There's no other business, so may I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn?
Okay. Motion to adjourn by Commissioner Keeley, seconded by Commissioner Workman. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Motion carries.
Thank you, Vice President Schultz. I now reconvene the Burnsville City Council meeting to ratify the actions of the EDA. I don't think Ms. Fry needs to say it again. All we're doing is approving the actions of the EDA.
Motion to approve the resolution adopting the Burnsville Economic Development Authority EDA 2020 property tax levy.
Second?
There's a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Okay. And members of the council, there are no other items to come before us this evening, and a motion to adjourn is in order.
So moved.
Second?
There's a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. And the motion carries. Thank you for being with us, and have a great rest of the week.